Kim, and welcome to Esotouric's podcast, You Can't Eat the Sunshine, for the week of April 13th, 2015. Join us this week as we talk with Joan Jobe Smith about her new memoir, Tales of an Ancient Go-Go Girl, and about bikers, bars, Charles Bukowski, and her loving father, Avner. We'll also visit with filmmaker Alina Skrzeszewska to learn about her current project, Game Girls, a documentary about the female experience in Skid Row, a place of tremendous pain and healing, too. So stay tuned.
You can't eat the sunshine, but you can make a beeline for the best of the coastline. La 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 la. Skid Row, Solano Canyon, the Doria, and Pico Union, the long-lost neighborhood called Hermina, between South Pass and Highland Park, Grand Central Park. It is divine. You can't eat the sunshine, but it's a gold mine.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for listening to our podcast, You Can't Eat the Sunshine, for the week of April 13th, 2015. This episode will have two interviews, as always. Joan Jobe Smith, who is a poet and has just published her memoir, Tales of an Ancient Go-Go Girl. We'll also speak with filmmaker Alina Skrzeszewska. She is currently raising funds and working on this documentary she has, Game Girls. I hesitated because it's kind of complicated. We'll get into all of this. What you need to know.
It's a process.
It's a process. We're going to get into all this. Takeaway, you need to go donate money to our Indiegogo campaign. Okay, and we're going to get into all of that. So, and of course, the documentary about women on Skid Row, which is really, it's a woman's episode, right, Coop?
It's tales from women you don't usually hear from. They're usually the object of male desire and perception, and we're going to flip the tables today and hear what's going on from the female point of view on the dark side of LA life.
Great, perfect. Okay, and Kim, you are indeed the Pishka maven, so do you want to bring us up to speed on our digital tip jar?
I'm happy to. This is a podcast. You're listening to it. It is non-advertising supported. But if you'd like to support what we do and you're so inclined, you can go to the podcast page. There's a digital tip jar associated with it, and you can make a donation of any size to help support our work. We are greatly appreciative of the support of our listeners. It helps us travel around the Southland looking for fascinating people to talk to, for you to listen to, and pick up the occasional chili reno burrito or cup of hot Joe or what have you. And never obligatory, always appreciated. Thanks for your support.
Good. Thank you, Kim. Thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna jump into the closely watched train section. And did you need that cup of tea? Did you take your sip of tea?
Oh yeah, I have some tea. I just if I put the teacup down on this little tile, it makes a chipping noise, and I know it doesn't show up on the mic, but I'm a little bit uptight that way, so I'm putting it on a cloth instead.
You're gonna talk about this piece of tile, which is a replication of a Catalina backgammon tile from Avalon.
Yeah, we went to the tile show in Pasadena, mostly just to hang out with Brian Kaiser, which was a good idea because these tile shows aren't what they used to be, and he definitely needed someone to talk about the Holy Roman Empire with, and that was us. And while we were wandering around, there was just this incredibly charming vendor who made a sale to you, Richard, of this cute little tile that's a quarter of a backgammon set. And I am a bit of a backgammon shark, which for some reason you're obsessed with. So
and it has the little felt trivets on the bottom, so it's automatically ready to be it has the felt pads underneath, so it's automatically ready to serve as a trivet.
Yes, it's totally a trivet, and I love it. And it's actually really cute. It looks like a crown.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
The cats are freaking out, Richard.
And the cats, wow, that was amazing that they didn't knock that over. Okay, so let's move on to closely watched trains. So we're going to start this week off with we're thinking about William Pereira. Okay, so this is going to be William Pereira is officially a closely watched train
Yeah, he's only like the most prominent architect who gets no respect in Los Angeles. No respect. Considering the projects he worked on, they're just all getting remodeled and knocked down, and it's kind of horrifying. It's definitely time to look back at Pereira.
Okay, so just for those of you that don't know, William Pereira, a 1963 Time Man of the Year, the man with the plan, deeply involved at a core level with the development of Irvine, the city, and the UC campus at both ends. Newport Island, Newport Beach, the island there. He was involved in that. Yeah. So just okay, LACMA, 1964. You can't walk, drive, or look down Wilshire Boulevard out from La Brea east without seeing a lot of his work in South Park and downtown, the AT&T Center, which is still this giant. So William Pereira is really important. There, a lot of his work is threatened. There was a forum at Occidental College a few weeks back, which Christopher Hawthorne hosted, and our friend Alan Hess was one of the panelists for. And this is, again, we've only begun this closely watched train campaign, but remember William Pereira. He's terribly, terribly important modernist architect, really one of the great regional modernist, I think. And if you want to understand downtown in the 1970s, you got to get your head around Pereira.
Yeah, and the situation at the LA County Museum is so important, not just because Pereira's campus, which has been,
destroyed.
It's already been badly damaged by the Art of the Americas building, the thing that looks like the bathroom that faces onto Wilshire. A lot of bad decisions were made, but there's no reason it can't be peeled back. And that wonderful Mad Men era, is there a more marketable term than that in contemporary architecture? I don't know. That wonderful Pereira compound can't be revived, except for just the rampant ego-driven architectural situation down at that corner on Wilshire. For some reason, art museums seem to think that they're in the commissioning of grand architecture business as opposed to the curation and development of their audience business. And
that's because the only game in town, if you're a museum, is to find a wealthy patron and matron who want to be dined and wined and coddled by a star architect for 10 years.
Yeah, I know. And it's boring. And the notion of turning that corner into some sort of giant Zumthor replica of a tar pit that shades the tar pits or that crosses over Wilshire or what have you, it's just, it's kind of tedious at this point. Can't we just live on the spaces that we've already created and do something fabulous for the community? I'd like to see that. So I don't know. I see that these new projects keep getting pulled back and getting changed in response to massive community outcry, which isn't always about the Pereira. It's just about kind of hating the design. And that's interesting. It's interesting that architecture is no longer something that's just done in the dark in the boardrooms with the ultra-wealthy and the top museum officials. It's actually kind of responding to Twitter. And that's all the more reason to just do something for the community and get your Twitter feed full of positive feedback.
Thank you, Kim. SB 608, State Bill 608, is currently in debate. This bill has a moniker, Right to Rest Act. I'm not about to get deeply into the pros and cons, unconstitutionality, constitutionality of this bill. I bring it up simply because one of the mainstays of the opening meditation of my downtown public space, or what we call the lowdown on downtown. The opening meditation is, can you take a nap in Pershing Square? Okay.
Not would you want to, but can you? Without being disturbed.
Right. Can you take a nap in Pershing Square? This has been a question I've started the tour with since 2007. It's a very valid question with the privatization of public space downtown through the Downtown Central bid and the Historic Core bid, and the use of injunctions. It seems this question seems more pertinent than ever, especially post-occupation of City Hall and Pershing Square. And so I simply put it out there that this bill, the Right to Rest Act, is really interesting because it would basically prevent bid patrols from making people they felt were undesirable move along.
Yeah, ideally. And, there was a situation in Berkeley a couple weeks ago where someone just happened to be looking out a window with a smartphone and got footage of one of these bid ambassadors, is what they call the security guards in Berkeley, in the alley behind the CVS, viciously assaulting a young man with his bike and his dog and his friend, who were, clearly gutter punk types, but they were just trying to live their life and stay cool on a hot day, and they were attacked by this guy in a green shirt. And what ended up happening was that the young men were arrested and charged, and they probably would have been well on their way to some sort of jail sentence, except the man with the video camera came forward and said, that's not actually what happened. And, the bid ambassador got fired, and the head of the bid said, oh, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. That's not how they're trained. But of course it is. I mean, the reason that these bids walk around and kind of are so big and aggressive and talk to the people on the street is because the businessmen who pay them would rather kind of grungy homeless people not be hanging out in front of the businesses. And that's nice, but it's kind of akin to the notion of Orthodox men getting on airplanes and saying, I don't want a woman sitting next to me. Well, then buy the whole row. You can't buy the sidewalk, guys.
Okay, yesterday we were fortunate enough to finally meet Jean Bruce Pohl. Jean Bruce Pohl. Pool. Did I say Pohl? Pool, as in Dr. Jekyll's butler. Pool. Pool is Dr. Jekyll's butler.
Please go on.
Jean, we started to talk to her. We're going to continue this discussion next week. Just 1977, 2001, she was curator of the Plaza.
Okay. Street.
Yeah, the Plaza being Alvera Street, the whole historic property, which is now under the control of the city of Los Angeles, but began life as a state park back in '57, and is. I
only say Alvera Street because you have to be kind of an old LA geek to call it the Plaza.
Okay, and I am an old LA geek. All right,
Plaza sounds like a hotel.
Right, Alvera Street. Okay, so Jean, almost just shy of 30 years, she's been in charge of cultural programming down in the Plaza, Alvera Street.
You can call it the Plaza now.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay. So, we're not going to talk about the Plaza. We're going to talk about the question Jean asked and the two answers she gave, which I think actually completely define the problem space of downtown in the last 30 years and the next 30 years ahead. And this is relevant to the bits. Okay, So you asked Jean, just because you've never met her, and she's obviously such a giant in the field, you say, so what is the problem with the Plaza? What has it always been, and what is it now? And she says, the problem with the Plaza has always been money and politics. Not enough money and too much politics. So you then pull back a little bit and you say, what's wrong with downtown? Money and politics. Too much money, too much politics. You start to look at the role of business improvement districts then, now, the next 10 years. You see that there's more money. There's even more politics because more people are moving downtown. And I see a real power struggle between the city of Los Angeles, which is essentially ceded control of the central business district, to the bids, and their desire to have more input and to get the bids to, quote-unquote, play ball, which they have absolutely no interest in, and with good reason.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that, there's been a great deal of public awareness of the problems in Spring Street Park, which is the park basically at 4th and Spring that was opened with no plan for maintenance, with the idea that they would simply hand it off to this non-existent nonprofit that had no fundraising and no management experience, and filter a bunch of Quimby funds to this nonprofit run by the head of D-Lang. It's ridiculous. And of course, the nonprofit has never stepped up to the plate. And in the last couple of weeks, LAPD has stepped up patrols. We happen to see Officer Joan Joseph down there, and he's been down there again, and he's been bringing his partner. And simply, being in the park and having a presence, the city having a presence in the form of LAPD is definitely impeding some of the negative activity that was going on there. It's just like, hey, the world is here, we're watching, let's all behave well. Meanwhile, over next to Angel's Flight, there was a little wildfire last week, and that was in the completely fenced-off Angels Knoll Park, which is CRA land. It's passed on to the CRA successor agency. It's been on the market forever with the hope that it would be Cal Plaza 3, a high-rise, which may or may not ever get built. And the property was fenced off pretty much at the direction of quote-unquote stakeholders. Adele Yellen from Grand Central Market says she didn't do it, but it was at the same time that Grand Central Market was very strongly pushing to have more of a face out onto Hill Street and bring in some higher-end coffee and dining on that side. And the people who were just sitting there in the plaza were considered unsavory, and so they fenced the whole thing off, and now it's catching on fire. That's public space that, with a complete lack of vision and a desire to eventually put that piece of property on the market is completely unavailable. It's some of the only mature trees left in downtown. It's a beautiful viewing spot. It's got a little cinematic pedigree from that silly movie.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. Okay. So, money and politics. What, Kim?
It's so easy to fix this stuff.
No, it isn't, Kim. It's actually really, really, really hard to fix this stuff, and that's why it's so hard, because elected officials actually have to have focus, they have to have a moral compass, and they have to have humility, and they can't be interested in self-promoting, which is the biggest challenge, and we have to keep moving on.
Yes,
Kim, Naval and Marine Corps Reserve Center in Elysian Park is possibly going to be sold to the city of Los Angeles for $1. This is a beautiful, streamlined, modern structure, which basically has served as a headquarters for firefighter training for about 30 years.
Yeah, and they'd like to maintain it as such. And if the city does get the opportunity to purchase the property, they're going to have to agree to make it a historic landmark.
It is on it's national register.
They'll have to agree to make it a city landmark, which will give it some more protection, and they'll have to invest about $5 million in preservation. If the city chooses not to obtain this property, we're looking at a very interesting and concerning issue because, of course, there's been an attempt to sell the adjacent historic property, Barlow Sanitarium, for development, and there's been a lot of opposition to that, and this property could also be a development target. It's got a huge parking lot. So I think we're going to keep a close eye on it, and maybe we'll get a chance to go in. I've always wanted to see the interior.
I've put off for almost 3 years doing a flaneur in the city walking tour of Elysian Park because doing research on Elysian Park was really low on my list because it wasn't a tour book entry or something or another, and now we're back to Barlow as a tour book entry and a problem, and so I think we're gonna put a flaneur in the city walking tour of Elysian Park on the calendar in late summer, and maybe we'll get one of the deputies involved in the Chavez Ravine eviction to make an appearance and talk for a little bit too.
Yeah, maybe we'll find that old cemetery tucked up in the hill.
Yeah, it's there. The Jewish cemetery's there. Okay, moving. Okay, Broadway is on my mind, Ken. The pharmacy, 3rd and Broadway, northwest corner. Their lease is up, but they're not going to renew. Southwest corner. Thank you. It's in the $1 Million Theater building. They're not going to renew. This Botanica is. One of these. It's a pharmacy, but they also sell a lot of
ritual objects.
Yeah, ritual objects for I'm going to quote the owner. Gentrification is killing us. I want to go where people like us. Downtown, they don't like us.
This shop has been there as long as I've been hanging out downtown, going back into the 90s when I worked at Mocha. I mean, this place is extraordinary. It's filled with these bizarre sprays that bring you love or drive off your enemies, and candles and little figurines and things that you're supposed to go down to the plaza, to the church, and hang up a little replica of the body part that you're praying for. It's real old Afro-Cuban Latin religion. It's pretty daffy, and it's thrived for decades, and it's really something to think that the changes on Broadway have... It's not just that the landlord doesn't want them anymore. I mean, people are not shopping on Broadway as they once were. And if the new face of Broadway doesn't pick up, and it certainly hasn't proved to be a success, we've seen, closures of attempts on Broadway, and just kind of a lack of street life, a lack of nightlife. The tower got tagged. The front face of the tower got tagged on a weekend evening. If it's not going to be a Latino shopping district, and it's not going to be a really happening non-Latino gentrified shopping district, maybe it's just dying again. I'm really sorry to see the Botanica go. That was always a neat place to look in the window of or wander through, and having that there right across the street from the Bradbury building just seemed like a wonderful confluence of oddball, offbeat, spiritual time travel, strange LA. I'm going to miss it a lot.
I think the two saddest places, the two hardest places for me to be in Los Angeles these days are anywhere on Broadway between 2nd and Olympic and the parking lot of Urban Radish. I love both these places dearly, but the changes that are going on in both these small neighborhoods, these little microcosm neighborhoods, I just like want to hyperventilate, and I just have to sit down and start reading the notes, Judd's notes to chapter 2 with the Bhagavad Gita, because it becomes so despondent sometimes, and I know it's just my ego and pain and fear of change, but it's very, very tough.
What is going to go into the location where the Botanica is now? What possible tenant does the $1 million building have in store for downtown that's going to provide as interesting windows and as much as a public service? It may not be the public service that you're looking for, but I think that the landlord really needs to think about this. If they're not going to allow
the landlord
them to
would
stay,
be Adele Yellen.
Yeah. If they're not going to let this thing stay, what do you have for Los Angeles that's better? Because if you don't have something better, don't raise the rent. They've been here for a long, long time, and they've provided a true service to the community. And they're nice in there.
Okay, they're gone. They're not renewing it. They
know.
don't want to stay.
I
We have to keep moving.
I know, but I'm still going to call them on it because it's the truth of the matter. If you own a piece of property and you're leasing it out, you have some responsibilities to the city beyond just cashing the check.
No, you don't.
Yeah,
but that's okay. And see, that's why you're not a slumlord.
And Adele Yellen isn't a slumlord.
I didn't say Adele Yellen wasn't a slumlord.
It's frustrating. We have no control over this, but it's really hard to watch. And remember, that intersection received a great deal of public money.
It did. It did, and we don't even have time to get into that. But everyone who's aware of that situation is aware of what you're talking about. So, Kim, keep that focus. Let's just move over to Highland Avenue and the Swap Meet building.
It's not Highland Avenue.
I mean, Figueroa, Highland Park. Let's move over to Figueroa, and Highland Park.
God save Figueroa. God save Mr. T's Bowl and the swap meet there, which is being evicted, and the hotel up above. Everyone has to leave. I guess they'll be able to come back. It says it's going to be a hotel after all of the vendors get evicted. But, this has been one of the flashpoints for discussion of gentrification of Eastern Highland Park, because of course Western Highland Park, York, has completely taken off. That street has definitely gone over the mountain and it's come up the other side. But Figueroa was always funky and trashy and cheap, and it's not anymore. And we're going to see if they're going to be able to get any tenants. There have been a lot of problems in a comparable situation over in Echo Park, on Echo Park Boulevard. the old, what's the name of the building? They changed the name to the Grafton Lofts, but it used to be called the Dell something or other.
Yeah.
Anyway,
where we get our haircut.
Yeah, Lucas Salon is there. Flounce used to be there. They got chased out after multiple floods. And the El Bate Market got thrown out, and that was a huge blow to the community. And no one's moved in because the rents are completely outrageous for what is basically a walking street for a very, very small neighborhood. Obviously, Figueroa is different, but we'll see if it's going to work. I think in many cases, these really hopeful landlords come in, buy a piece of property well above value because they've kind of drunk the Kool-Aid and they think that Highland Park is going to be Abbot Kinney. You might have to rename the street for that to happen.
Kim, Merrick Avenue.
Merrick Avenue?
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about?
Traction.
Oh, yeah. It's Merrick Street.
Merrick Street.
Yeah, I got confused there. Developer bought the old Coca-Cola bottling plant, or I guess not the bottling plant, but the manufacturing of the fluid, the Coke fluid plant, which is bounded by Traction to the north, Fourth to the bottom, and Merrick, this tiny little one-block street on the eastern side, right up against what used to be the rail yards. And they apparently went to La Raba, which is a small business and neighborhood group for the Arts District and the river, and asked their permission to rename Merrick Street Traction at the part where it runs between Traction and Fourth, because they want to call their development, which is a mixed-use development, Traction and Fourth, which is a non-existent intersection. And La Raba said, oh, well, what can you tell us about Merrick? And apparently someone from SciArc and someone from Jose Huizar's office did some research. I don't really understand what that means.
They spent 15 minutes on Google, and they toggled between the images and the Google Books tabs.
I don't know what they did, but they said Merrick isn't a family name, and there's no historical merit for Merrick to exist. So this is an okay thing to do. Let's do this. And then the people from La Raba had a vote and said, okay, I guess that's fine. And apparently this is bouncing up to the city. First I heard of it was already a done deal. Saw it on the Arts District Facebook page, and I was just like, Merrick, that sounds like a family name. And I did a little digging and polled some of the wonderful LA history geeks over on the Pueblo Plaza Yahoo group, a very small but rather active group when there are questions of provenance and history. And a couple of us came up with the same supposition. Merrick goes back to the 1890s, or 1880s, 1889, and is probably not a family name, it's probably a first name. Lumber Baron. What's his last name, darling? Oh, Reynolds. Merrick Reynolds. Sorry, I didn't see it on the list, so I didn't put it to the front of my brain.
We just.
I know, it's fine. So Merrick Reynolds, who was bringing lumber up from San Pedro around that time, we looked into some other sources. There's a list of all the street names behind the reference desk in the lower fourth floor of the LA Public Library. That street's not listed, interestingly enough, but you know,
1 block long in an industrial neighborhood.
Right, but it used to be called Rio, so it's an old Spanish named street. We know that much from the LA City Council mention in the Herald newspaper. Anyway, basically my point is quite likely that this street was named after a real person who happened to not just be bringing lumber up from San Pedro, but also was a founder of the city of Glendora, got into some financial difficulties because a employee was siphoning money off from the lumber company, and later went into two very interesting arts-related businesses, was a amateur photographer of San Pedro scenes, and there's some beautiful photos that survive, and also on Broadway in the 1900s had a shop and sold art objects and paintings and photographs in arts and crafts frames. So a perfect person to memorialize, assuming the street was named after him, which is certainly worth further digging, a perfect person to memorialize in the Arts District. And
Kim, what does the county have to say about guidelines for this? And we
Right.
we do have several emails and phone calls, desperate phone calls out to archivist Michael Holland about this question.
Yes. Send out the Michael Holland feed. So the county does have a list of rules on what you should do when you rename streets. And interestingly, I mentioned Abbot Kinney and the notion of renaming. Abbot Kinney was renamed in part because there were so many Washingtons down in that part of the world that the fire department was having a hard time responding. And although many people said, please don't rename Washington, we love Washington, that's part of the reason that the city agreed to that renaming.
There were 3 major Washingtons before they renamed Abbot Kinney.
Yeah.
And growing up, and I loved maps growing up, I was confused with just 2 Washingtons growing up near there. Yeah.
So what the county says, and I've been trying to find a similar document for the city, I haven't found one, but the county says, number 1, you should retain historic street names wherever possible. So Merrick, going back to 1889, number 1, you should save that. You should also not rename streets at the request of developers in order to promote developments. You know, you're not buying the sidewalks and you're not buying the streets, man. Fourth and Traction doesn't exist. They should be proud of Merrick. And the notion, I guess they went into this La Raba meeting, the developers, and said, people are going to have a hard time finding our property. Dude, everybody has GPS.
You just, Google Plus sends you a postcard.
Yeah.
With your address,
Yeah.
You submit it, and then you get the postcard, and it has a verification code, and you log into your Google Plus account, and you type in the verification code, you're done.
Yeah, the reality is if you can call your property Fourth and Traction, you're piggybacking on Third and Traction, which is a hot intersection, and you can probably charge more rent. But the city isn't in the business of making that feasible, and I think it would be a tragedy to lose this remnant of 19th century Los Angeles. And honestly, it has been kind of fun digging into Merrick Reynolds' history, and I would like to get a definite confirmation that that street is named for him, but it's named for something. It has value and it has merit, and I think it's tragic that there are all these little organizations around town that are being used as rubber stamps for the city to approve stuff like this. This is completely inappropriate. The people at La Raba care about the history of the neighborhood, and that's the reason they go to these stupid meetings. No offense, but it is stupid that you're having a meeting about this and that no one else in the public is informed, and that you're being presented with the notion that research has been done on your behalf, so you are informed, when all it takes is a search of the Historic Herald and the LA Times and some maps and some history geeks getting a little upset to come up with a very viable possibility. And I'm sure if the people in La Raba had heard about Merrick Reynolds, as the people in La Raba heard about him on the Facebook thread where I added some links, they wouldn't have just voted, yeah, sure, why not make it Fourth and Traction? That sounds like a good idea. They would have said, why are you trying to erase Arts District history? And that's what I'm asking, too.
The Arts District needs so much help. Okay. Kim, we're going to keep positive. Norms got approved as an HCM by the CHC. Do you want to tell everyone what that means?
Yeah, it means that the process is moving forward for the Cultural Heritage Commission to send this nomination up to council, and it's pretty much a done deal because the council
gotta go through Plum.
Gotta go through Plum, gotta go through City Council, but it's when the CHC says yes, something's a cultural heritage is city landmark, in our opinion, usually it does get voted through, and this is a case where you can save the building. I don't know if Norms can be saved. Little sister went to Norms a week ago and said she had a wonderful experience. It was a great community. People are really happy it's there. I hope it can be saved as a diner and, not just a lovely shell of what it used to be. But we'll have to wait and see. There's certainly tons of community support.
Good. Okay, Kim, we're done with Closely Watched Trains. Upcoming events. This podcast episode, our second interview, is with Joan Jobe Smith. This month's April Sunday Lava Salon is with Joan Jobe Smith. Topic is, of course, her memoir. So, if you like this interview with Joan, and you will, because she's one of my favorite people in the world and a complete and utter genius, come to the salon. Sign up for the salon. It will be Sunday, April 26th, 2 to 4:30 p.m. Library Bar. That's at 6th and Hope. The Lava Sunday Salon has changed its location and its time. So if you're used to the good old days, well, they exist in your mind, but in the present, they start at 2 now, and we're a couple blocks to the west at Library Bar.
And here's the most important thing to remember about the Lava Sunday Salon. Don't show up at 2 and be looking at your clock and saying, hey, are you going to start now? We actually want you to meet people and talk to people and have a nice time.
Yeah, okay, so let's just, Kim, how is your FAQ for the salon?
I was going to write an email.
Okay, you're going
to give me the email to write.
I'm going to give you the FAQ.
Because, no, when you're ready to send the email, the reminder, I'm going to put it in there because it doesn't need to be on the website. It's only for people who are signed up.
I know that, Kim. I know that the FAQ is not a necessarily public document, but a document that people that have figured out how to sign up for the salon get. Do you want to review quickly the FAQ because we're really we're really shifted gears, and I jump up and down and say this at the beginning and the end of the salon, but I think people aren't getting it, and so this is important.
Well, I mean, the reason they're not getting it is because for a couple of years we did this thing where you just sat down and you looked at someone really brilliant putting on a slideshow, and it was fantastic, and then you split, and that's cool. But Figaro closed because Broadway's dead, and we're not doing that anymore. So
and Library Bar is graciously opening their doors early for us, and really we have to hit a bare minimum of sales for it to be worth it to them to open up, and we so appreciate it. So.
And it's not a problem because their French fries are fantastic, and one person at the table gets some, and the next thing you know, everybody's getting the fries and beverages. So here's the thing: if you are the sort of person who really wants a good seat, a comfy seat, close to the speaker with a good view of the screen, you should get there at 1:30, okay? You really should, and stake out your seat. And you may have to bring a sweater to put down on your chair, but you're going to be fine. Really, everyone who wants to sit is going to be able to sit. And you should be comfortable with the notion that everyone in the room is a really cool, interesting person who is friendly and you can talk to them. Because there's going to be a break while the brilliant person stops for a while because Richard reins them in. And then you can buy their book if they have a book and get it signed. And you can go up to the bar and order some of those French fries or a beverage. And you can actually talk to the people around you. And that's what we want you to do. And that's part of the reason why we're extending the official time of the salon, even though the bar stays open and there's nothing keeping you from remaining and lingering afterwards, from 2 to 4:30 to give us a little more elbow room and more of a sense of, hey, show up, plan to spend the afternoon, learn something, meet some people, have some fun, and don't be looking at your clock.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. Okay. Interviews. We have to get to them. Okay. So we're going to interview Alina and we're going to interview Joan. We're going to interview Alina first. Okay, I guess I just said that. Because we're interviewing Alina first, I will introduce Joan first because she'll be second. Okay. Joan Jobe Smith. I don't know. Unbelievable. Just want to openly weep. You should genuflect when you say her name. No, really, you should.
She's listening to this. You're embarrassing her.
Good. I'm glad I'm embarrassing her. Okay. Joan Jobe Smith, poet, Pearl Magazine. Publisher, poet, memoirist, long mentorship with Charles Bukowski, and I would argue the mentorship worked the other way than what she says, as in she mentored Charles Bukowski. Okay, books. Very quickly, Epiglottis is her book about Charles Bukowski. Joan has stayed in touch with all the women in Charles Bukowski's life, and this is.
Wait, I just figured it out. You're right. Bukowski writes about women a lot in the 70s, and he's getting his perspectives on what the hell is in their heads from Joan.
Yes.
Oh, you're right.
I know I'm right.
Because she knew all the girlfriends, and she saw him through all the fights. Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The male psyche, while insatiable, is terribly simple, Kim. Terribly simple. That's why men are fascinated with the women, because they actually have complexity to their psychic structure, which is what all men crave and need. All right, so we're going to talk about Joan's memoir. Joan's memoir. We're going to get into all of that. I don't think we're going to get into in this interview, and I want to throw it out there. We'll talk about this at the salon. She has a great story about my hero, Sheriff Peter Pitchess. Her father, Avner. Get into all of this at the salon. It's all in the memoir. I don't think we're only going to touch on it briefly in the interview. But her dad really went to the mat and got Peter Pitchess's attention, and really did very good work. And I've talked to several of our friends in the sheriff's department. I've told them the story about Avner and Joan and Sheriff Peter Pitchess, and they all say, "Yep, that's pure Pitchess. Yep, that's exactly what he did. That was Peter Pitchess."
Maybe we should come up with a signature scent called Pure Pitchess.
No. Okay. Great. So that's Joan's, our second interview. Our first interview is with documentary filmmaker Alina Skrzeszewska. She has made a 2010 documentary called Songs from the Nickel, which is a really great film. She took up residence in the Barclay Hotel, which is at 4th and Main, and interviewed residents of the Barclay. It's a fantastic piece.
And the King Eddie.
She did a documentary on the King Eddie about a year, about the smoking room in the King Eddie, and we've actually done screenings of both these films at the King Eddie while it was under the Craig family.
No, we only did the short one.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we were going to do. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll do a screening of Songs in the Nickel. She's great. Okay, so she's been making films on Skid Row for almost 8 years. I want to say 10. I don't know. She'll send me an email if she's grossly offended by that figure later. But she's great. She has a new project that is in production as much as a documentary can be in production. She'll explain. This will all make perfect sense during the interview, which will start in just seconds. What you need to know, Game Girl is a film about the narratives of women on Skid Row. These are invisible narratives. These are people who are invisible, women on Skid Row. It's a huge problem. We get into all of this. She is raising money to complete the work needed to get this film made. She'll get into all of that. So the Indiegogo campaign, as of the publication of this podcast on the 13th, will have about 4 or 5 days left. So we really encourage everyone.
Yeah, and as you'll hear in the interview, unlike a lot of projects where a filmmaker is raising money and it's basically to pay for the cost of, the music rights or the syncing or what have you, what they're doing for this film is actually doing these creative performance workshops with the women, and that's how their stories are being developed, and they're telling their own stories. So if you're contributing to this film, you're really contributing to the process of finding their voices, and I think that's a really beautiful thing. I love what Alina's doing.
Yeah, so Joan and Alina are two of my favorite people in the entire world, and we're so delighted to bring you their interviews. So with that, let's take it away with my interview with Alina, and don't forget to go to Uli's and get some gelato yourself. Alina, I'm here with you. We're at Gelateria Uli, and I need you to properly introduce yourself and quickly tell us about some of the films you've already made, and then we'll get into the film you're currently getting to and we're going to talk about.
So my name is Alina Skrzeszewska. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I have been making films on downtown LA Skid Row for close to 10 years now. I started out by making a feature documentary with the title Songs from the Nickel. I started that when I moved into one of the Skid Row hotels in 2006, and the film came out in 2010. I made a film about the King Eddie bar that's called Last One Left. It's a shorter one. And I made a film for German television about kids who work with their parents in an alley in the toy district. So that one's kind of about immigration and children's play, but within Skid Row as well.
Perfect. Okay, let's get to the work at hand. So you're working on a project. You're fundraising for, so tell us the name of the project, tell us about the Indiegogo page, and we'll just slowly peel away the layers till we get to the core of this project, and that people you're looking for help.
Yes. So I've been working on a film about women on Skid Row for a few years now. It's called Game Girls. And the idea basically came out of shooting Songs from the Nickel, which, as I said, turned out to be about men, which is not something that I planned. It's just something that happened. Yeah. So ever since then, I've really been wanting to make a specific film about women who survive on Skid Row. And I've been figuring out how to do that. It turned out to be quite a complicated thing, because to really get to authentic stories, I felt I had to dig really deep and find a different kind of strategy to get at the stories. So the observational shooting that I had used for the other film, the kind of straightforward observational style, didn't quite seem to cut it. So I wanted to do something different. I started these workshops, free workshops for women in Skid Row. We started those over a year ago. The first one was on January 29th, 2014. And we've been running them ever since. They are facilitated by this amazing drama therapist. Her name is Mimi Savage. She elicits stories by really going through a therapeutic expressive arts process with the women. So it's really kind of like a playful, very friendly, safe zone for the women to express themselves, to find healing, to sort of get a different perspective on their lives, on their stories, and on their future, reconnect with their goals. So that's been a really, really amazing process. And this is kind of for me, almost like the study for making the documentary. That's how I've sort of tried to really understand what the experience is in a visceral way to live on Skid Row as a woman.
This is living on Skid Row as a woman is something that's a relatively recent problem to Skid Row, and this is, it's in the past. For instance, Union Rescue Mission purchased houses on Alvarado Terrace as a women's shelter. The notion was in the 80s, you get women off of Skid Row, because it's just too intense. And now, so I'm not asking you, so my question for you is, in the last 10 years that you've been downtown, how have you seen women on Skid Row and their roles change and their situations change? Because I think this is a very quickly moving target.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there are just more and more of them, honestly. Yeah. I guess the numbers of people on the streets in general have increased, but yeah, I definitely feel like I've seen more women. I also feel like there's been a little more response to the needs of women at the same time, but obviously this is not enough at all, because they do have very, very different, they have a different path usually than the men of coming down there, and oftentimes they're disconnected from their kids, and a lot of the times their goal is to reconnect with their kids, which Skid Row kind of makes impossible. Yeah. Yeah. Because of the way the housing is set up. Yeah. So that's something that kind of adds to the pain, adds to the hurt that they go through, and that's oftentimes sort of the big promise at the end of the recovery, to be able to somehow reconnect with the kids and get somewhere where they can actually live with them again. And it's very, very difficult in this housing situation, in this kind of income inequality situation that we are currently living in this society, to actually find that space to live with family and as a low-income woman.
Perfect. So these workshops that you've been running for a little over a year now, this is really the engine that's driving the narratives that you're going to pick up in the film. And you've just done a very good job, because you've lived through it, of talking about your experience with women on Skid Row the past 10 years. Are there any other overarching goals or problems that you maybe not even be explicitly the film is about, but you just want to put on the table, that are dealt with tangentially in the film, that you just as an idea that you want to put on the table for people to hear about?
Well, there's so much.
Yeah, so just, right, exactly. But you hit on the head with reconnecting with your family. Is there just one or two other main ideas that are hovering over the heads of women and people that are trying to help women in Skid Row that you just want to put out there for people to start to think about?
The main thing, I think, is that people really, Skid Row is such a microcosm of sort of every single social issue almost that's present in U.S. society, and they all come together, and people really don't understand how that impacts an individual's lives. I mean, if you look at it as some kind of a statistic or some kind of a problem zone, then you just don't understand what it really is like to live life impacted by these issues. So mental health being one that I think is hugely misunderstood, and it really takes such a long time to get any kind of a sense of what that's actually like and how it's possible to navigate life if you're facing mental health issues. It's kind of a difficult one to talk about. What I've found, and that was really, really shocking, even though I sort of knew about it theoretically as a statistic, is the level of abuse and oftentimes early childhood and sexual abuse that women have gone through when they get to Skid Row, that they have experienced. Like I said, theoretically I knew about this, but it's a very, very different thing to read a statistic, for example, about women who have been incarcerated, with the shocking numbers of like close to 90%, I believe it is, that have actually gone through childhood abuse, and then they end up being criminalized. So, but hearing those stories in a personal level over and over and over again is just, it's just insane, because you kind of start realizing, okay, so these are really people who have been hurt in a very, very deep way in a very early moment in their lives, and then they go through they end up in this really marginalized situation, sort of instigated by that early wound. So it's that can't be. It seems really wrong.
Right. So I guess that's really, and I want to get to the fundraising, and I want to get to the rubber hitting the road and you raising funds to get this documentary made. That's really my last question is Skid. I really, when I think about Skid Row, and it's almost impossible to think about Skid Row because it's so upsetting. It's easy to sit in my kitchen and make dinner and think about Skid Row. It's easy to sit in my kitchen and eat dinner and talk to my wife and talk about Skid Row. But you're down at 6th in San Julian and your head wants to explode. Can you calmly, in some sort of reasoned fashion, talk to us about this feedback loop that we've been sort of talking around the whole time, this cycle of abuse and criminalization and the end goal, which is healing, right? Do you just sort of want to give us a roadmap to how that feedback loop stops becoming a negative one and somehow becomes positive and gets us to some goals that are empathic and humane and caring?
That's really the other very, very interesting thing about Skid Row. I guess we all as humans have this kind of amazing capacity to adapt to whatever situation we are in and then to transform it, because Skid Row has certainly transformed, and it has become, while it is still the largest, let's say, concentration of homeless people in the nation, it is also the largest recovery community, and it is a very, very active community. Recovery and community. Both words are really, really important. So this is something that comes from the ground up. This is something that people sort of develop on their own. So there is definitely a good side, a strong side to Skid Row that has to be acknowledged, and that's being acknowledged way too little, because people are really people have a lot to give. People have a lot to share. They have a lot of wisdom. They have a lot to teach people who have not been through these experiences. And this is something that I feel like is coming out more and more. This is something that I do see our project being a little bit a part of. It's creating a community of women, specifically of women, self-run, who have forged alliances and friendships and are kind of helping each other out in all kinds of ways. And that's how healing happens in community. So we're not the only ones doing, this participating or that's yeah. I just find that whole notion of community really, really crucial, and to understand that people there have something to offer.
That was beautiful. Okay, that was really beautiful. You did it. Okay. Okay, so, good. All right, so we need to go back to the beginning, reiterate. You have an Indiegogo project. We'll put that URL on the webpage for this specific episode. You don't need you to tell us. We'll just go look at it. Tell us about the fundraising project. Tell us about some immediate next steps you would like to get to with help from people.
Yeah, so basically it's been really amazing the support we've had for the project so far. We've actually pretty much financed over a year of workshops and development and shooting from France. I mean, as crazy as it sounds in Los Angeles, Skid Row, but yes, France has been the main funder. So, because I was able to hook up with a French production company, and they secured various grants. So now we're at a point where we've exhausted those funds. We've been doing this for over a year, and we couldn't, because we couldn't stop the workshops while waiting for additional funding. We've decided that we have to do a crowdfunding campaign.
Sure.
So we're trying to raise $20,000. And your help will be greatly appreciated because we really need it at this point. The women need it, we need it, and we can't go on if we don't make our goals. So
okay.
Yeah.
And when you hit the $20,000 goal, so goals and objectives. So
right.
you're gonna hit the $20,000 mark. You're going to.
Yeah.
Thoughts have wings.
Yeah.
All right. Visualize we're getting there. What are the next couple steps once you hit that milestone?
Right. So what we want to do next is to basically we have about 5 more months of workshops to go.
Okay.
In this time, we are planning to finish scripting actual scenes with women.
Okay.
Like I mentioned in the beginning, this is not a straightforward observational documentary. Yes,
Right.
we are filming observational moments with the women in the workshops and outside of the workshops, but we are also co-creating scenes that are going to be shot more like a fiction film, that are representing the women's dreams and hopes and their inner lives in a kind of poetic and fictionalized way. So this is something that's coming out from the workshop. So we're sort of gleaning all the little details along the way that we've experienced together with the women and putting those in scenes, and we're going to be co-creating them and shooting them. It will also fashion will be an important part of this process, because we feel that it's something that pretty much everybody on Skid Row can relate to, and it's something that you have some level of control over, and it actually can express a lot. Film, I guess, always works through the superficial to show something inner, so it's a logical way for us to do that. So we are going to be creating costumes with the women that will speak to what's going on inside.
Perfect. Tell us, properly introduce us to us as we lead out, and the name of your project, and we'll wrap this up.
Introduce.
You tell us your name. Just tell us your name again and the name of the production.
Okay.
And we're going to send people to the Indiegogo page. And I think you're a genius, and I'm looking forward to you hitting the $20,000 mark.
So my name is Alina Skrzeszewska. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm working on a film called Game Girls, about the lives of women on Skid Row, invisible lives that we want to make visible. And we look forward to your support on our Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign. Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Alina, thank you. We'll send people to the Indiegogo page on the website, and we'll look forward to checking in with you in a couple of months when you hit the milestone.
Yes, thank you. Me too.
My name is Suzanne Lummis. I'm here in City Hall in Los Angeles, and you're listening to You Can't Eat the Sunshine.
Joan, I'm here with you. We're in Long Beach, and I need you to properly introduce yourself, which will be a great way to warm up to the topic of this conversation, your soon-to-be-published memoir.
I'm Joan Jobe Smith, and I'm founding editor of Pearl Magazine and Bukowski Review, and I'm a former go-go girl. I worked 7 years, from 1965 to 1972, at various nightclubs around Southern California. That included one audition at the Whiskey a Go-Go back in 66, when the Doors were there, and I danced with them one night.
Perfect. Okay, good. So let's sort of take this piece by piece. You have been publishing for a minute or two. So do you want to, before we get into your memoir, which is being published by Marjo Press, do you want to tell us about your history in publishing?
Okay. Well, I'm a publisher doing a literary journal since 1974 to perpetuate other poets and writers, and I'm also a poet on the side and a writer. And my first publications started happening in the 70s in the small press, and I was a friend with Charles Bukowski in the 70s, who encouraged me to write my go-go stuff. And a lot of the go-go poems and little prose pieces were published back in the 70s. And I wrote a few short stories about it and sent it off to UCI, and they accepted me for an MFA based on the go-go stories. But then when I got there, they wouldn't let me write about the go-go thing. They thought it was tawdry. And plus, in the 70s, memoir was absolutely anathema. Yeah. It was high literature then to make up your stories, although one of my favorite writers then was Singer, and he was writing all those wonderful anecdotal stories about his Jewish life and I guess the people that he'd known all of his life when he lived in, the ghetto, and then later, and I guess he wrote things when he moved down to Florida, and he was pretty old then. But I loved him. I loved Singer. He was one of my favorite writers. So
tell us about Pearl. So you took out a student loan to start Pearl. So let's Pearl is an important milestone for you. Yes,
Pearl was wonderful. I thought of her with he was my art director, David Scott, and I was at Cal State University Long Beach at the time, involved with the local writers like Gerald Laughlin, who was a professor there, and Leo Mielman, who was getting his master's degree, and he was publishing Nausea. But anyway, David and I decided to do an all-women's anthology, a literary journal, because women weren't being published too often, as they still aren't too often, but more so now. But back then it was pretty much a man's pursuit to be a poet in America. And Sylvia Plath, of course, had made it more fashionable for women to write, and a lot of women were wanting to be writers. And I got funding at Cal State Long Beach to do the first issue of Pearl, and it was widely acclaimed. It really was. I'm not bragging about this. It got a lot of reviews nationally. It was just really a charming book, and thanks to David Scott's expertise, he helped lay it out and put it together. I designed the cover, and it was calligraphed because I couldn't afford a typesetter. It was so popular and so esteemed, and I got good reviews, that I got funding from the honors department for the second issue my senior year at Cal State, and they funded it, and I got 8 units of credit, 8 units of A, which helped me get helped me get a scholarship to law school later on because of my high grade average from Cal State Long Beach, but that's another story. But anyway, the third issue, when I was in law school, I got a student loan and funded that issue, and it was perfect bound. All three of them were perfect bound, and that was rather unusual then for a literary journal back then to have that kind of money, because perfect binding was just a fortune. I mean, you could buy a Cadillac practically for what it would cost a perfect bind, like 1,000 copies of a book. And typesetters, oh my God, you had to be rich to hire a typesetter. They made $20 an hour or something like that. So that was my first three issues. I ran out of money. I didn't do Pearl again. And then I went to UCI where I wanted to reprise Pearl, and they didn't like the idea of it. They didn't believe in collegiate publications at the time. We were supposed to go out and get published in New Yorker and the Paris Review and Harper's and Atlantic Monthly and those good magazines, and get discovered by Simon & Schuster, sell our novel, get a movie, get rich, be Hemingway, be Erica Jong.
That's not your path, though.
Pardon?
That was not your path.
No, I would have liked to have done that, but they didn't like my go-go stuff, and they just absolutely refused to let me write any of those while I was there, and I didn't. I wrote about something else because I have another thing they didn't like is that I wrote in the first person, and I tried to write in the third person. I can't. I'm just a blabby memoirist. I have to write about things that happened to me, and the reason for that is I've had an extraordinarily strange and hectic life. In fact, Bukowski once said, you've had a life I've never heard of, even worse than his practically. But he created his own misery.
Do you want to tell us who Pearl was named after?
Okay, I named Pearl for two people, Janis Joplin, whose real name was Pearl. I loved her at the time. I still do. And my mother, Margaret, which is Greek for pearl, I found out. So I combined the two women, my mother, whom I adored and would later take care of for 10 years as she lay dying, and dear Janis, who had just unfortunately died at the time.
So why don't you just, this is not explicitly, well, this is, why don't you tell us about Charles Bukowski and your reign, which will then get us over to Margot Press and your memoir.
Okay. Well, Bukowski really loved Pearl, and he really thought it was a good magazine, and because of his enthusiasm, I decided, and plus lack of submissions, I decided to turn Pearl into men and women. Because I found out that one reason there aren't very many women writers in magazines, there aren't that many women writers. There weren't that many women poets. I didn't get very many submissions. So I had to include the men. And because he was going to be featured in the fourth issue, that was going to be a male chauvinist pig issue, which he loved that. He was going to write a bunch of male chauvinist pig poems just for me. And his writing, he's not, you can't call him a chauvinist. I don't know anyone who loved women as much as he did. And it wasn't because he was promiscuous and a lecher. He really did love women. He found them fascinating. He found them interesting. And when he and I started talking on the telephone, he found out what I'd done for a living, he thought I had just been a bored housewife going back to college. Then he found out that I'd had this really rugged life as a dancer for 7 long years, and going into bars that he would have been afraid to go in, because some of those go-go bars were really rough, and a lot of them were mafia owned, so it's kind of scary
I think
sometimes.
All of them were mafia owned. Yeah.
I know, but I chose not to write about that because it got kind of scary, But I was never affected by the mafia because I was girl next door type, and they like women that look like Jane Mansfield and Mamie Van Doren and Va Va Voom girls. And so Bukowski really encouraged the go-go stuff. That I sent him the first draft of when it was a chapbook phase, and I titled it Tales of an Ancient Go-Go Girl. And Bukowski didn't like the title because he said I wasn't ancient yet. and I was 34 at the time. So he was kind of right. I wasn't yet ancient. And I am now. I'm beyond ancient. So he said to change, he liked another title I had thought of called The Crotch Watchers. Well, of course, wouldn't Bukowski prefer The Crotch Watchers? Which is another reason UCI didn't want me to name my thesis The Crotch Watcher. I would have given the school a terrible reputation if they had have allowed that. And so he read the chapbook. That was a combination of prose pieces and poetry, and they were pretty low down. They were pretty raw, not profane the way Bukowski could often be, but they were tawdry from a woman's point of view of what it's like to be sexually harassed by pervs and drunks, and it got pretty ugly. And later on, as the years went by, I thought, these are rather dreary. Besides the fact, tawdry per se, I don't know if that might be the word. They're kind of depressing and downer poems. So when I later wrote new poems about the bars in the late 90s, I uplifted them a little bit. I made them more romantic. I made them, the girls were all beautiful, but I didn't make them quite as brutalized and used and as we really were, because we were really worked to death, dancing and then serving beer. It was really brutal what they did to us. But it's worse now. It's really horrible now. But we were compensated. We made a lot of money. But Bukowski loved the stories. He encouraged me to write them. And I named it Crotch Watchers, and now I've changed it back to Tales of an Ancient Go-Go Girl, because they're ancient now.
Okay, good. So let's take a breath. So we've gone through Pearl. You've gone through your apprenticeship with Charles Bukowski. You're now publishing your memoir now, which has been something you've been thinking about for decades, under Marjo Press. So do you want to talk about Marjo Press, and then we'll get Marjo Books.
Because Pearl is the press of editions.
Okay. So do you want to talk about Marjo Books, and then we'll just jump into the memoir?
There's nothing to say about it. We're just starting Marjo Books right now to do my book, and then probably Marilyn, depending on how her life is going. She's pretty busy taking care of her husband, who's ill, and we'll see where the future goes, because Marilyn's really interested in doing books, because it's so many people want them now. And she wants to do Fred. She'd like to publish Fred. Fred's got 7 unpublished novels. For me, this will be my only big book. You know, I've written tons of stuff, but I'm too, I don't know. We'll see if I ever have the energy to put together any stories or outtakes, because memoir takes a life of its own. Memoir writes its own memoir as you go along, because you're writing about your life, and while you're writing about your life is happening to the memoir, you know, and you add more and more, and then you get bloviating and BSing, and you've got to go back and determine what is the core of it, and where's the journey, where's the path of it, where's it taking you. And then, so I have all these little side streets of the memoir that's little stories of crazy things that happen in my life. They're all true, because I can't write. I have no imagination. I can't write fiction. And a lot of, well, I won't get into that. A lot of writers do write about reality and truth, but they often steal someone else's story. Not steal it. They, no, writers don't steal. We're honest people. We're good people.
Do you want to? Okay, let's jump in to your memoir, Tales of an Ancient Go-Go Dancer. Do you want to tell us one anecdote from it?
This might be an anecdote. Let's see. One of the stories that was just brutally attacked in the workshop at UCI when I was there was a story I wrote about the fort during the Watts riots of '65, and some events that happened, and my colleagues, my fellow students, were outraged. They thought it was a shaggy dog story, they called it. This couldn't have happened. This wouldn't have happened. We've taken into consideration, I was a lot older than these kids. I was like going there when I was 37, and they were like fresh out of a BA someplace, and they were like 22 at the most, at the least rather, 24. Some Vietnam vets going to school on the GI Bill. They had been around, but they hadn't seen what happens to women inside these bars. And I have a quote from a couple men on blurbs saying that they didn't know what was going on either, that they go in there to looky-loo and they don't see what's happening to, the rest of it. What all the glitters is often looks like gold. And if it's pretty, it must be pretty. But anyway, so this anecdote, it was kind of scary. It was really I worked the night shift, and you know where the fort is.
You should explain to people where the fort is.
The fort was in the armpit of Southern California, and I mean where all the sludge and sleaze, that's the dust bin, that's the garbage dump. It really is. Next door to the fort was a great big auto wrecking. Then there was a shipwrecking. And then beyond that was piles and heaps of sludge that came from someplace. You've been past Bandini, they're piles of fertilizer. Beyond that, and then the oil refineries. And at the inside of the fort smelled like beer, oil, gasoline, men sweating, and urine from wherever that came from, I don't know. But it all mixed together. The dust of Long Beach and the clientele were stevedores, bikers, the Navy guys, because the Navy was still there. These and Vietnam vets shipping out. I mean, nothing but men. Maelstrom of men. And they were tough guys. They went in there to get drunk and just look at a girl's kneecaps and go home, But then at 8, a really groovy blues band would come on. That's I got to hear. Oh God, now I'm forgetting all of them. Junior Wells, Musselwhite, the Rivingtons was there my first week that I worked there, and I loved. Remember the Mau 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 Mama Mau, and so they were really tough guys, and none of the students believed that place was there, and it was still there, but by then it was a disco. So I did take them into that part of town, and they said, oh my God, look at this. Well, here's the anecdote. It was, the Watts riots broke out in the night, and I worked the night shift, and I'd slept all day to get ready for work. I didn't watch TV, and I didn't listen to radio, because when you listen to a jukebox 10 hours a day, 8 days a week, you don't care about the latest top 10 hits. I didn't like the Stones or the Doors, and I didn't care what they were doing. And my kids were away on a camping trip with a neighbor, so they weren't watching TV. I go to work at the fort down there in downtown, right next to the shipyards, and there was a railroad. It was across the other side of the railroad tracks too, and there's nobody on the freeway, on the Long Beach freeway. There's traffic. This is rush hour. Nobody on the freeway, and I hear gunshots. I go, what is this? What's going on? Really stupid. I get to the fort. There's no pickup trucks, no big-ass cars, no jalopies in the parking lot that these stevedores drove to work. Nobody. It was empty. I go to the door, and it was unlocked because the guy who was managing the place had just dropped some acid, and he was going to spend the night at the fort, just have a good time by himself, and he left the door unlocked. I go inside, and he says, what are you doing here? Didn't you know about the Watts riots? And I didn't. I didn't know at all. I'd gone to work, and so we went out on the roof of the fort, and we could see way, way out into the distance that you can see Watts from there. And the sky was all lit up, and this was right around sundown, right about 7 o'clock at night in August. And it was just beautiful. The sky was absolutely beautiful with all that fire, and it was a full moon. Big, beautiful blue full moon coming in, over the San Gabriel Mountains. It was just a beautiful night. And then when we got down back into the bar, these two black men walked in. They'd come to see the Rivingtons. They didn't know it was a Watts riot either. They had driven in from Riverside, and they wanted to know what was happening. You know, what's going on here? Where's the Rivingtons? What's going on? And so the manager, he pulls out a gun on these black guys, and they're innocent as baby Jesus, you know, but they're big guys, you know, and he's being scared and racist and thinking that they're going to loot us and kill us. You know, they were part of the rioting black guys, and they're just saying, "Oh, no, let us, no, honest, mister, we know nothing about it." So they left peacefully. Nothing bad happened. So that was one of the stories that nobody thought was true.
I think all your stories are true. So I think everyone who reads your memoir will agree with that statement of mine. I want to wrap this up because I want people to buy your memoir because you're an utter genius and one of my favorite people in the world. I want you, though, to just, I would like, just as a way to wrap up this interview, explain to us how Deep Throat really put an end to go-go dancing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just to sort of give us just sort of the end of go-go dancing in Los Angeles, in Southern California.
Yeah.
Well, in the country, but in the context of Southern California.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, Richard, when we first met, did you know that bikinis were banned on state beaches back in the early 60s?
You told me that, and I was really happy.
Because you saw in that Foncello on the beach blanket bingo stuff, and but you didn't notice that you couldn't see their belly buttons. But belly buttons were against the law when I started out being a go-go girl on the beaches. So in the go-go bars, for a girl to be in a bikini was just scandalous. It was scandalous. And so that was 65. Well, the go-go bars opened about 63, there was Life magazine wrote a big article about it in 1963, and there was go-go girls that I knew that were on the cover of that Life magazine, just talking about the phenomenon of the go-go bars and bikinis and outrageous. And so by about 67, love-ins came in, and the hippies were all stripping naked, and then Woodstock was in 69. Everyone danced naked at Woodstock.
Let's not forget Griffith Park, just to keep it local.
Griffith Park, yes, there were love-ins, and not everybody took their clothes off and danced naked. You had to, get in the mood, and so there. But on 6 o'clock news, they would show the topless girls, these young pretty girls taking their tops off, and that would be the big happening on the news. And so time went on, and about 1969, when psychedelic bands came in, go-go was starting to die, and then bang, 1972, Deep Throat was appearing in a theater right around the corner from where your kids walked to school. And if you've ever seen Deep Throat, you know it's a long way from an exposed belly button. And so it was over. Yeah. It was all over by then. They started showing, well, forget that.
You did it.
It all changed.
You did it. Thank you. This is great. I want you to give everyone all the information about this book, which is, at the time of this interview, we're a couple of weeks away from its publication, so we'll wait. But when we publish this, your book will just be out. So tell them where they can find it and all the details.
Okay. You'll be able to find my book on Amazon, and it'll be available in Kindle or paper book form, or you can also contact www.pearlmag.com and order it from Marjo Books itself, the main office.
Perfect. Joan, I want to thank you. You are pure delight.
Thank you, Richard.
Hi, I'm Tim Whalen. I'm director of the Getty Conservation Institute, and you're listening to You Can't Eat the Sunshine, which we're recording here at the Getty Center in Los Angeles.
And we're done. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to our podcast for the week of April 13th, 2015. Our podcast title is You Can't Eat the Sunshine. Kim, I would like you to tell us how people can get in touch with us, what I colloquially refer to as the feedback loop.
Well, I hope there won't be any loud feedback, because that makes me jump sometimes. But if you send us an email at youcan'teatthesunshine@gmail.com or through the contact link at www.esotouric.com, we'd be happy to hear from you. You can also come and see us on an Esotouric bus adventure. Yes, sometimes people say, oh, if I get on the bus, will I meet you, Kim? Will I meet you, Richard? Oh, yes, you will. We're on every tour. That's what we do. You can also come to one of the Lava events we host, as, for instance, the Lava Sunday Salon, or one of the Crime Lab seminars, forensic science seminars, if you will. And we have one coming up in the summer all about serial killing.
Perfect, Kim. Thank you so much. Okay.
I'm not done.
You're not done?
You can also, you can make a comment on the iTunes page for the podcast, or if you're finding the podcast through another source, there may be a way to share or feed or review it, and we're always so grateful for your positive feedback there, too, because it helps more people find the show. Thanks.
Good job, Kim. Okay. We are now at the part of the podcast where you take us home. Upcoming bus tours and our salutation. So take it away.
Yes, indeed. Well, we have a couple of more crime bus tours coming up in the month of April. And if you like true crime and offbeat LA lore and the notion of me telling you stories that'll give you nightmares, you should get on the bus. April the 18th, it's the Real Black Dahlia, our most popular crime bus tour, where we walk in the footsteps of the victim in the still unsolved 1947 Los Angeles murder mystery. Beth Short was a transient who spent a lot of time downtown and also in Hollywood and in Long Beach. We'll visit some of her downtown haunts and get to know her as a person, and then go out to the place where her body was found and talk about this very strange crime and all of the odd doors that it opened up into understanding how Los Angeles functioned in the post-war era. On April the 25th, it's the second excursion of one of my brand new crime bus tours. It's called Echo Park Book of the Dead. No gentrification on this tour, just mortification. And I've learned some new things from some even deeper archival research since we gave this tour the first time in the fall. I think I understand my characters even a little better. So come get on the bus and meet some old-time Angelinos who got into lots and lots of trouble. And also tour Sister Amy Semple McPherson's beautiful house museum, which does probably have the most beautiful tiled bathroom in Los Angeles, which you can only look at, you can't use. That is a restroom break, but that's not the bathroom you can use. So that's April the 25th. In May, we're doing some literary tours. We have the Charles Bukowski tour, speaking of Joan Jobe Smith, revealing the secret ways of women. That'll be on May the 2nd, and that goes through Crown Hill, downtown, Skid Row, historic core, East Hollywood, a lot of places where Bukowski lived and grew and transformed himself from a postal worker to an internationally famous author. And of course, we'll also go to Bukowski Court, which is now a historic landmark, in part due to some work that we did with some other wonderful preservationists. That tour is always a lot of fun. On May the 9th, it's Raymond Chandler's Los Angeles, and I don't know what's going on out there. A lot of people I've never seen on our bus before are buying pairs of tickets, so I think the word is out, and some people are planning to get together on that Chandler tour. Yeah. It's either date night or it's a bunch of friends. So I'm looking forward to seeing who they are, and maybe we'll see you there too. That's a tour of downtown and Hollywood from the 20s to the 40s, the young... the narrative always was that the early part of this tour was about Chandler before he was a writer, but last year I discovered that Chandler was actually writing Gilbert and Sullivan-esque musicals here in Los Angeles in his late 20s. So we'll be talking about The Princess and the Peddler as well on that tour, and then we'll get into his Hollywood years where he worked with some really difficult people and got into lots and lots of trouble and made some brilliant, brilliant work. And I must say, on that tour, we go to some of the most beautiful time capsules in Los Angeles, including the Barclay Hotel, previously mentioned. On May the 16th, and please spread the word to your friends, this is a once-a-year bus adventure called Crawling Down Cahuenga, Tom Waits, LA. It's hosted by my longtime compadre and co-author David Smay, who wrote a lovely little 33 1/3 series book about this pivotal Tom Waits album called Swordfish Trombones, which came out in 1980, and it's sort of when he begins to move away from Los Angeles. So through the story of how Swordfish Trombones happened in the hothouse of Zoetrope Studios, where, by the way, I was a preteen intern, so I have a little voice in that tour as well. We'll follow Waits through the 1970s, developing as an artist and finding true love at Zoetrope and changing himself enormously and visiting locations that are very, very important to him. And David gives a great tour, and he always wears really good shoes. So you want to get on that bus. At the end of the month, May the 30th, it's Eastside Babylon, without a doubt my most unhinged crime bus tour. It's dark. It's horrifying. And if you're planning on attending the Serial Killer Summer Session at the Forensic Science Center in Cal State LA, you might want to get on that bus because you'll be able to tell the people sitting next to you, well, you know, I've been to Hubbard Avenue, where the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez was beaten half to death by the neighbors who held back and delivered him to law enforcement so that he could eventually turn green in prison and die from hep C and cancer and God knows what. You got to be pretty evil to turn green.
If you're incarcerated for life or 20 plus, don't get sick. Yeah. So, you know, a moniker Nathan Marsek's father, Leonard, God rest his soul, genius, one of the great stars, steered by my, was fond of telling Nathan and I as we would go off into the world after having a very good meal with Leonard and telling him exactly the women we intended to bed and the trouble we intended to get into, would always say, avoid jails and hospitals. And if you're in jail, avoid the hospital and jail.
Thank you. Now, I'm sure he got the best care that was available. What am I talking about? Eastside Babylon. There's other great crimes on that tour, but we do go to Hubbard, and we do go also to Evergreen Cemetery, and we go visit my friends the Carneys, and we talk about the Radio Shop murders, which is a case that chills even my blood. And but wait, there's more. We actually have a couple of weeks off in June, but on two.
It's a couple.
That's a couple. But on June the 20th, it's a tour we haven't given in quite a while. It's always a delight. It's a crime bus tour called Blood and Dumplings about the San Gabriel Valley. And the Eastside Babylon is directly south of a lot of the places that we visit on Blood and Dumplings. Blood and Dumplings has some truly twisted crimes, but it has a lot more levity and just wackiness. And that's the San Gabriel Valley to me, the flip sides there. I love that tour, and yes, there are dumplings. We will have a dumpling picnic in the beautiful folk art environment known as Lugo Park. So get on that bus. I'm looking forward to giving that tour again. It's always nice to revisit these characters. And then finally, at the end of June, I mean, it's not the only tours that we have listed, but this is as far as I'm going. It's Weird West Adams, a tour about a lost neighborhood bisected by freeways and housing covenants that were broken through the work of some really right-on brothers and sisters right here in Los Angeles in the West Adams area. And we'll be going through Rosedale Cemetery and visiting some of our favorite dead people. That tour is always a hoot, and we'd love to see you on the bus.
Great, Kim, you did it. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone out there, for listening. I encourage you to stay tuned, and I want to remind you,
you can't eat the sunshine.
You can't eat the sunshine, but you can make a beeline for the best of the coastline. La 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 la. Skid Row, Solano Canyon, the Doria, and Pico Union, the long-lost neighborhood called Hermina, between South Pass and Highland Park, Grand Central Park. It is divine. You can't eat the sunshine, but it's a gold mine.